I was asked to do this right after I had turned 40, and I remember thinking like, this is ambitious, but it's also somewhat foolish, but it's worth. Chesterton's line, if something is really worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And so I thought, well, at least I'll do this. And with Curtis's help, it'll be better. And if it ends up being something that we're not all that proud of, somebody will read it and say, I could do a better job. And I would say, go for it. Yeah, please do.
Wow.
And so just doing it that way, little by little, year after year. And it was hard to explain to the experts in Nashville at Thomas Nelson Bibles how we would pay for it, because they explained the whole process of building a budget, of building a team. And when I said we're going to do it with one guy working full time, he rolled his eyes, Frank did, and just said, forget it. It'll never happen. And I'm thinking, you don't know Curtis Mitch. I do. And I think it might happen. It's worth trying,
Did you know, you obviously knew when they asked you 27 years ago that it was going to be a massive undertaking. Were there points in the process that you thought, all right, we may have hit a brick wall. That was nice. Maybe we'll release some of the books separately, but we're not going to be able to finish this thing, or never?
Yeah, I felt that. I think Curtis Mitch might have felt it more because we had more kids. I got busier. I began traveling. I was teaching full time. I was working on other book projects. And Curtis was too. He wrote a wonderful commentary on Matthew with Edward Sri, Dr. Ted Sri. And he also co-authored the commentary on Romans with me for the Catholic Commentary on Sacred Scripture. So, and he was also teaching as an adjunct professor at the university. He's working full time for the Augustine Institute now. But he seemed to me to be the kind of guy who could go the distance, like a marathon runner, or more like a mole who could just keep burrowing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I am convinced from conversations that we had that he would hit a wall. And I would try to encourage him, affirm what he's done. But we were always concerned about, well, how long will the budget hold out, And it held out for the most part. We had to supplement things at times. But the bottom line was that I had a thought, and I ran it by the committee there in Nashville back in January of 97. And I said, 98. I said, what if we publish separate fascicles like on Matthew, Mark, Luke, John?
Yeah.
I knew that the Jerusalem Bible, the French had done it that way at the École Biblique and other things. And they just said, no, forget it. If you could in any way recoup expenses as you're working on the project, we would have done it. We would have thought of it. And thanks be to God for Father Fessio, because he heard them say it, but he looked at me and he said, we'll try that. And so we came out with individual volumes, fascicles on the four Gospels, and then Romans and Acts, and we began using them. I ran into colleagues who were using them for undergraduates as well as for graduate seminars.
I feel like there's a market here. Just the way y'all did Thomas Aquinas' commentary on Romans and that beautiful book, not intimidating. It was just the English. If you had a book that looked like that and it was just your commentary on Exodus, I would love that. I would buy that. So is there any plans to continue doing individual books, or no, we're done?
We're going to continue, I think,
Yeah.
because it succeeded beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
I think it paid for the entire project and then some.
Wow.
And so what we did was to kind of, supply creates demand. So a supply side approach to producing a Catholic study Bible ended up, so that Ignatius Press was probably asked as much as I was, when will the study Bible be complete? Well, the New Testament was complete back in 2010. And people saw that and said, well, okay, when the Old Testament comes out, it'll be like 3 volumes.
Yeah.
Well, Word on Fire is coming out with a multi-volume Bible that is a beautiful project.
Yeah.
And I have all 4, the ones that are out yet so far. But no, this was thick pages. And so this is thinner pages. We're going to end up doing a paperback version of this in the next 2 or 3 years. We're going to also strive to do a compact version. So the gold standard back in the 90s when we started for the Protestants was the NIV Study Bible. And Curtis and I both looked at that and said, do you think we could ever even approximate that with a Catholic Study Bible? And then the ESV Study Bible came out. We're like, oh man, it's even bigger and longer, and it's really good, especially if you're an evangelical Protestant. But it had all these glitches when it came to the passages that Catholics know you have to kind of sidestep if you're non-Catholic. And so that was our standard, and we went for it. But honestly, I believe, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, as the team grew, as we delegated, as we ended up with Andy Swafford and John Bergsman, Michael Barber and Mark Ishak, and I shouldn't have started the list because now I have to say Jeff Morrow, yeah, and then John Kincaid and Andre Villeneuve and David Twellman and Jim Prothrow and, oh boy, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is like an all-star team.
Wow.
And Curtis had enough good sense to figure out exactly how to delegate.
Yeah.
And all these guys had great training and a goodwill to help us cross the finish line. I told you before we started that I was a COVID skeptic for a while back in 2020. But even more, I was a study Bible skeptic.
Yeah.
I had practically given up. I had really begun to think I won't live long enough to see the study Bible.
Right.
And so instead of the 4 last things, I refer to the 5. And this is one.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.